Perched on his favorite spot by the window, Tucker watched the world with eyes far more observant than most humans realized. The African grey parrot's sleek feathers gleamed in the afternoon sunlight as he tilted his head, tracking the movements in the elegant living room of the Carter household. What he witnessed day after day made his feathers ruffle with distress. Penny Carter, a strikingly beautiful woman with raven hair and eyes the color of summer storms, had hired Natalie as a full-time nanny for her infant son, Blake. On the surface, Natalie appeared perfect, experienced, well-recommended, and always impeccably dressed in pressed slacks and crisp blouses. But Tucker knew better. When Penny and her husband Richard were home, Natalie was the picture of devotion, cooing at Blake, singing lullabies, and providing detailed reports of their daily activities. The moment they left, however, her demeanor changed completely. Her gentle voice became harsh, her tender touches turned rough, and baby Blake's cries were met with cruel indifference. Tucker had always been an unusually perceptive bird. His previous owner, an elderly language professor named Theodore, had spent years teaching him not just to mimic words, but to understand context and meaning. Now those lessons served a vital purpose as Tucker observed the mounting tension in the household. The parrot noticed how Blake would wail in distress whenever Natalie entered the room, how she would grab his tiny arms too tightly when moving him, and how she would ignore his cries for hours. But what troubled Tucker most were the whispered phone conversations he overheard late at night, when Natalie thought everyone was asleep. "The plan is almost ready," she would murmur into her phone, pacing near Tucker's cage. "Once I get access to their accounts, yes, I know what to do with the baby. No one will suspect anything." Tucker's vocabulary was extensive, but he struggled to find the right words to communicate the danger. He tried various phrases: bad lady, baby crying, help needed. But Penny and Richard merely thought he was mimicking random phrases, as parrots often do. Their dismissal of his warnings only made Tucker more determined to expose the truth. One evening, while Penny was feeding Blake before bedtime, Tucker noticed Natalie in the kitchen mixing something into the baby's formula. His heart raced as he watched her carefully measure drops from a small dark bottle, her movements precise and deliberate. The parrot's instinct screamed that this was wrong. That night, Tucker made a decision. He had to find a way to protect Blake, no matter the cost. But how could a parrot convince humans of such a serious threat? As darkness fell over the house, Tucker remained awake, his mind working through possible solutions, while Natalie's shadowy figure moved through the rooms below, preparing for whatever sinister plan she had in motion. Penny's sister, Olivia, who lived nearby, would sometimes visit with her daughter Daisy. Tucker noticed how Natalie's behavior would shift subtly during these visits, a flash of annoyance crossing her face when Olivia appeared unannounced, the way she would hover nearby during conversations, and how she would quickly redirect any questions about Blake's care. As Tucker watched Natalie closing the curtains for the night, he caught a glimpse of her true expression in the window's reflection, a cold, calculated look that sent chills through his feathers. The parrot knew time was running out. Tomorrow he would have to find a way to make them understand, or Blake might face consequences too terrible to imagine. The weight of this knowledge kept Tucker alert as the house settled into silence. Through the darkness, he could hear Blake's soft breathing from the nursery, punctuated by Natalie's footsteps as she moved around downstairs. The parrot's keen ears picked up the sound of drawers opening, papers rustling, and the quiet beep of a phone being used. What Tucker didn't realize was that his chance to expose the truth would come sooner than expected, and in a way that would shock everyone in the household. Morning arrived with a sense of foreboding. Tucker watched as Penny prepared for another busy day at the hospital, her movements hurried but gentle as she kissed Blake goodbye. Richard had already left for an early surgery, leaving Natalie in charge once again. The parrot's anxiety grew as he observed the nanny's practiced transformation, her warm smile dropping the moment Penny's car disappeared from view. "Time for your medicine, little one," Natalie said, her voice dripping with false sweetness as she approached Blake's high chair. Tucker noticed she wasn't carrying the usual medication prescribed by the pediatrician. Instead, she pulled out the mysterious dark bottle from the previous night. Blake began crying immediately, as if sensing something wrong. His tiny hands pushed away the bottle Natalie pressed against his lips. "Stop being difficult," she hissed, her gentle facade cracking. "Just drink it." Tucker couldn't contain himself any longer. "No, bad, poison," he screeched, flapping his wings frantically. The sudden outburst startled Natalie, causing her to drop the bottle. It shattered on the kitchen floor, its contents spreading in a sinister puddle. Natalie's face contorted with rage. "Stupid bird," she snarled, advancing toward Tucker's cage. "You've been watching me too closely, haven't you?" Her fingers gripped the cage bars tightly. "Well, we'll have to do something about that." Just then, Olivia's voice called from the front door. "Hello? Anyone home?" She had a habit of dropping by unannounced, much to Natalie's constant irritation. The nanny quickly composed herself, kicking the broken glass under the cabinet and wiping the spilled liquid with her shoe. "We're in the kitchen," Natalie called back, her voice honey-sweet once again. Tucker watched as she hastily cleaned up the evidence, noting how she stuffed the glass shards into her pocket rather than the trash. Olivia entered with young Daisy in tow, carrying a basket of fresh muffins. Her eyes immediately went to Blake, who was still crying. "Is everything okay? He seems upset." "Oh, he's just being fussy about his breakfast," Natalie explained smoothly. "You know how babies can be." She lifted Blake from his high chair, bouncing him with apparent affection. But Tucker noticed something else, a small notebook that had fallen from Natalie's pocket during her hasty cleanup. It lay partially hidden under the kitchen table, its pages containing what looked like numbers and notes in her precise handwriting. While the women chatted, Daisy wandered over to Tucker's cage. The young girl had always been fascinated by the parrot, often sharing secrets with him during her visits. "Hello, Tucker," she whispered, slipping him a piece of her muffin through the cage bars. Tucker saw his opportunity. "Help, Blake," he whispered back, remembering how Theodore had taught him to string words together meaningfully. "Bad lady hurts baby." Daisy's eyes widened. Unlike the adults who dismissed Tucker's warnings as random chatter, children often paid more attention to animals. "What do you mean?" she asked quietly. "Poison in bottle," Tucker continued, his voice low but urgent. "Notes under table." Daisy glanced at the kitchen table, noticing the notebook with the casual curiosity of a child. She walked over and picked it up before anyone could stop her. "What's this?" Natalie's reaction was instant and violent. She practically shoved Blake into Olivia's arms and lunged for the notebook. "That's private," she snapped, her careful mask slipping again. The sudden movement and harsh tone made Blake wail louder, and even Daisy stepped back in surprise. Olivia, still holding the crying baby, noticed the strange tension in the room. "Is everything all right, Natalie? You seem different." "Everything's fine," Natalie insisted, clutching the notebook to her chest, but her composed facade had cracked, revealing something darker underneath. "I think it's time for Blake's nap. Perhaps you could visit another time." Olivia didn't move. Instead, she looked more closely at Blake, noticing for the first time the slight bruising on his arms where Natalie had gripped him too tightly. Her maternal instincts, already aroused by the tense atmosphere, went into higher alert. "I think I'll stay for a while," Olivia said firmly, her voice taking on a steely edge that Tucker had never heard before. "In fact, I might call Penny and see if she can come home early today." Natalie's expression shifted again, calculating and cold. "That won't be necessary. I have everything under control." She reached for Blake, but Olivia took a step back. "Daisy, honey," Olivia said calmly, though her eyes never left Natalie. "Why don't you go call Aunt Penny? Use my phone. It's in my purse by the door." Tucker watched the scene unfold with growing tension. He could see Natalie's hands twitching, her eyes darting between Olivia, Blake, and the front door. The notebook she held contained evidence of something, perhaps her plans, her true intentions, or worse. "Hurt, baby!" Tucker screeched again, louder this time. "Bad lady poison." "That bird has been nothing but trouble," Natalie said, her voice tight with anger. "Always making noise, interfering with Blake's sleep. I've suggested to Penny that we should get rid of it." "Really?" Olivia replied, her suspicion growing. "Penny loves that parrot. She's had Tucker for years, and she's never mentioned anything about getting rid of him." The tension in the kitchen was broken by the sound of Daisy's voice from the hallway. "Aunt Penny," Can you come home? Something's wrong with Natalie." Natalie's composure shattered completely. She made a sudden move toward the front door, but Olivia blocked her path. "You're not going anywhere until Penny gets here," Olivia declared, her free arm extended to prevent Natalie from passing. Tucker watched as Natalie's face transformed into something truly frightening. Gone was any pretense of the caring nanny, replaced by a calculating coldness that confirmed every suspicion he'd had. "You don't understand," Natalie said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This was supposed to be perfect. I had everything planned. The baby would get sick, nothing too serious at first, but with my special medicine, he would get worse instead of better. Penny and Richard would be devastated, too distracted to notice the missing money until it was too late." Olivia gasped, instinctively holding Blake tighter. "You were going to poison—" Tucker screeched again. "Bad lady poison baby?" The sound of a car screeching to a halt outside made everyone freeze. Footsteps pounded up the front walk. Penny had arrived home in record time, likely breaking several speed limits in the process. The scene she burst in on would be forever etched in her memory. Olivia backing away from Natalie, clutching Blake protectively, Daisy hiding behind her mother, Tucker flapping and screeching in his cage, and Natalie looking nothing like the caring nanny she'd pretended to be, holding a notebook full of secrets that were about to be revealed. The next few moments would change everything, but Tucker knew his job wasn't finished yet. There were still darker truths to be uncovered, and the full extent of Natalie's plans had yet to come to light. The Parrot watched intently as Penny took in the scene before her, knowing that the real storm was just beginning. Penny stood frozen in the doorway, her medical coat still on, stethoscope dangling from her neck. The tension in the kitchen was thick enough to cut with a knife. Her eyes darted between her sister holding Blake, Natalie's threatening stance, and Tucker's agitated state. "What's going on here?" Penny demanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to handling crisis situations. Before anyone could answer, Tucker's voice rang out clear and precise, shocking everyone with its clarity. "She hurts baby. Poison in bottle. Look under cabinet." The Parrot's words were unmistakable this time, no longer random phrases, but a coherent warning. Penny's eyes widened as she processed this unexpected revelation. Natalie lunged for her purse, but Olivia was quicker. "Daisy, grab that bag," she called to her daughter. The young girl snatched Natalie's purse just as the nanny reached for it, spilling its contents across the floor. Among the scattered items was a collection of vials, syringes, and what appeared to be hospital prescription pads. Penny gasped as she recognized the labels on the vials. As a doctor, she knew exactly what they were: powerful sedatives and medications that should never be anywhere near a baby. "Those are from my hospital," she whispered, the horror of realization dawning on her face. "How did you get these?" Natalie's composure cracked completely. Her laugh was hollow and bitter. "You doctors think you're so clever, don't you? Always too busy saving other people's lives to notice what's happening in your own home. Did you know your precious Blake cries for hours when you're gone? That he flinches when I come near him?" Olivia held Blake tighter, noting the slight tremor in his tiny body at the sound of Natalie's voice. The baby's reaction spoke volumes about what he had endured. "Check her notebook," Tucker squawked insistently. "Numbers. Plans." Penny picked up the fallen notebook, her hands shaking as she flipped through the pages. Inside were detailed notes about the family's schedule, bank account numbers, and what appeared to be calculations for steadily increasing doses of various medications. "It was perfect," Natalie spat, her facade completely gone now. "I had access to everything. Your home, your baby, your accounts. The plan was simple. Make the baby sick slowly. Just enough to worry you, but not enough to raise suspicion. While you were distracted with his declining health, I would handle your finances, your bills, your accounts." "Handle our accounts?" Penny's voice was barely a whisper. "Your signatures weren't hard to forge," Natalie continued, a hint of pride creeping into her voice. "And grieving parents rarely check their bank statements carefully. By the time Blake's condition became critical, I would have transferred enough money to disappear completely. The devastated parents would be too broken to notice the missing funds until it was far too late." The sound of Blake's whimper cut through the tension like a knife. Penny took a step forward, her professional calm warring with maternal fury. "How many times?" she demanded. "How many times did you hurt my baby?" Natalie's silence was more damning than any answer could have been. Tucker, however, had more to reveal. "Night medicine. Bad medicine. Show them. Show them." Olivia's eyes narrowed. "What's he talking about?" "The cabinet," Daisy piped up, remembering Tucker's earlier warning. "He said to look under the cabinet." Penny dropped to her knees, reaching under the kitchen cabinet where Natalie had kicked the broken bottle earlier. Her hand emerged with shards of dark glass, still wet with an unknown liquid. "What was in this bottle?" Penny's voice was deadly quiet. Before Natalie could respond, the front door opened again. Richard had arrived, likely called by Daisy when she contacted Penny. His presence seemed to trigger something in Natalie, perhaps the realization that her carefully constructed plan was completely unraveling. "You don't understand," she said, her voice taking on a desperate edge. "This wasn't just about the money. I wanted to prove a point. All you wealthy doctors with your perfect lives, thinking you can buy good childcare like you buy everything else. You never really checked my references, did you? Never really verified my credentials." Richard's face drained of color. As if in answer to his unspoken question, Tucker began rattling off names. Sarah Thompson, Michael Anderson, Baby James. Names that meant nothing to the family but clearly meant something to Natalie, judging by her reaction. "Shut up!" she screamed at the parrot. "Shut up! Shut up!" But Tucker wouldn't be silenced. "Other babies, other families. Look them up." Penny pulled out her phone with trembling hands, quickly searching the names Tucker had spoken. Her face grew paler with each search result. They're all families who lost babies under mysterious circumstances. All of them had nannies who disappeared afterward. The revelation hung in the air like a thundercloud. Natalie wasn't just a fraud. She was something far more sinister. A systematic predator who had made a career out of targeting wealthy families, harming their children, and disappearing with their money. Richard moved with surprising speed for someone who had just finished a long surgery. He positioned himself between Natalie and the door, his voice steady, despite the anger evident in his eyes. "The police are already on their way. Olivia called them right after she contacted Penny." Natalie's eyes darted around the room like a cornered animal. She seemed to be calculating her chances, weighing her options. The sound of distant sirens made her decision for her. She bolted toward the back door, but she hadn't counted on Tucker. The parrot had been watching, waiting for just such a moment. As Natalie ran past his cage, he extended his wing through the bars, catching her sleeve. The unexpected snag was enough to throw her off balance. She stumbled, crashing into the kitchen table. The fall sent her crashing to the floor, the contents of her pockets scattering across the tile. Among them was a small USB drive that skittered under the refrigerator. Tucker's sharp eyes caught its trajectory. "Evidence!" he screeched. "Under fridge! More proof!" The sirens were getting closer now. Natalie lay on the floor, the fight seeming to drain out of her as she realized there was nowhere left to run. But there was something in her eyes, a cold, calculating look that suggested this wasn't over yet. The police were pulling up outside, their red and blue lights painting the kitchen walls in alternating colors. But Tucker kept his eyes fixed on Natalie, remembering something he had overheard during one of her late-night phone conversations, something about a backup plan and insurance. The parrot had a feeling they hadn't uncovered all of Natalie's secrets yet, and the worst might be yet to come. Penny held Blake close, tears streaming down her face as she examined every inch of her baby, cataloguing any signs of abuse or neglect she might have missed. Richard stood guard over Natalie, his doctor's oath to do no harm visibly warring with his paternal instincts. But it was Olivia who noticed something odd about the way Natalie was lying on the floor. Despite her fall, despite being caught, there was a slight smile playing at the corner of her mouth. It was the smile of someone who knew something others didn't, someone who still had cards left to play. As the police entered the kitchen, Tucker ruffled his feathers uneasily. His warnings had helped expose Natalie's immediate plans, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to uncover. The parrot watched as the officers began to secure the scene, knowing that his job as protector wasn't finished yet. Whatever Natalie was still hiding, whatever her backup plan entailed, Tucker would remain vigilant until all her secrets were exposed and Blake was truly safe. The kitchen had transformed into a crime scene. Police officers photographed evidence while detectives interviewed family members. Blake had been taken to the hospital for a thorough examination, with Penny accompanying him. Richard remained behind to assist with the investigation, his medical expertise proving valuable in identifying the various substances found in Natalie's possession. Tucker watched from his cage as an officer retrieved the USB drive from under the refrigerator. His sharp eyes hadn't missed how Natalie's slight smile had widened when they plugged it into a laptop. Something wasn't right. "Careful! Trap! Trap!" Tucker screeched, but his warning came too late. The moment the drive was accessed, every computer in the house began emitting a harsh beeping sound. Screens flickered and went dark, and the home security system suddenly deactivated. "It's a virus," one of the officers announced. "She's wiped everything, security footage, computer files, everything that could have contained evidence of her activities." But Natalie's satisfaction was short-lived. Olivia stepped forward, holding up her phone. "Not everything," she said. "I've been recording since I arrived this morning. Every confession, every threat, it's all here." The smirk vanished from Natalie's face. She hadn't counted on Olivia's quick thinking, hadn't factored in the protective instincts of a sister who had sensed something wrong the moment she walked in. Meanwhile, Daisy tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mom, remember when Tucker started talking to me? I did what you always taught me. I took notes in my diary. Everything he said, everything I saw." The detective's interest was immediately piqued. "You have notes? From how long ago?" Daisy nodded earnestly. "I write down everything when we visit. Tucker started trying to tell me things weeks ago, but I didn't understand at first. Then I started noticing things too. How Blake would cry when Natalie came near, how she would act different when she thought no one was watching." The detective gathered Daisy's diary as evidence, praising her observant nature. But Tucker remained agitated. There was still something else, something important they were missing. "Phone calls. Night talks," he squawked insistently. "Others involved." This caught everyone's attention. The detective turned to Natalie, who had gone notably pale. "Other people involved? Care to explain?" Natalie's silence spoke volumes. The detective signaled to his partner, who began reviewing the call logs from Natalie's seized phone. The numbers told a disturbing story. Regular calls to multiple burner phones, all during late-night hours. "She's part of a network," Richard realized, his voice heavy with horror. "She's not working alone." As if confirming his words, Natalie's phone suddenly lit up with a message. Before anyone could stop her, she managed to glance at it, and her composed mask slipped completely. For the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. "You don't understand," she whispered, all pretense gone. "They'll come for me. They always come for anyone who gets caught." The detective leaned forward. "Who will come for you, Natalie? Give us names and we can protect you." But Natalie shook her head violently. "You can't protect me. Nobody can. They're everywhere. Hospitals, childcare agencies, reference services. How do you think we get our credentials? How do you think we find our targets?" The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about one malicious nanny. It was about an organized group targeting vulnerable families through seemingly legitimate channels. Tucker, however, wasn't finished. He began rattling off more names, addresses, and fragments of conversations he'd overheard during Natalie's late-night calls. Each word was another piece of evidence, another thread unraveling a conspiracy that went far deeper than anyone had imagined. The detective was furiously taking notes, his expression growing grimmer with each revelation. "We're going to need witness protection," he muttered to his partner. "For all of them." Richard's phone rang. It was Penny calling from the hospital. The examination had revealed traces of various substances in Blake's system, but thankfully, nothing had caused permanent damage. They had caught Natalie's scheme before she could fully implement her sinister plans. But as relief washed over the room, Tucker noticed something that made his feathers stand on end. Natalie's fear had vanished, replaced by that calculating look he knew so well. She was watching the officer's catalogue evidence, her eyes tracking every bag, every document. The Parrot suspected she was already planning her next move. "Watch her. Don't trust," Tucker warned, drawing attention back to Natalie just as her hand moved toward her collar. A sharp-eyed officer caught the movement and rushed forward, discovering a hidden needle. "Suicide pill," the officer announced, securing the evidence. Classic spy technique. She wasn't planning to live long enough to talk. This discovery changed everything. The detective immediately called for additional security. Natalie would need to be watched constantly, both to prevent her from harming herself and to protect her from whoever she was working with. As Natalie was led away in handcuffs, she passed by Tucker's cage. For a brief moment, their eyes met. In that instant, Tucker saw something in her expression that chilled him to his core. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Back at the hospital, Penny held Blake close, grateful for his safety, but shaken by how close they'd come to disaster. The baby was recovering well, his system already clearing the foreign substances Natalie had administered, but the psychological impacts would take longer to heal, both for Blake and his parents. Olivia arrived at the hospital with Daisy, bringing updated news from the investigation. The police were uncovering more evidence with each passing hour. Natalie's USB drive, despite destroying local files, had left traces that computer forensics might be able to recover. More importantly, Daisy's diary and Olivia's recording provided solid evidence that couldn't be erased. But Tucker, watching from his travel cage that Richard had insisted on bringing to the hospital, knew there were still threads to unravel. Natalie's network was vast, and they had only scratched the surface. The Parrot kept his vigilant watch, ready to protect his family from whatever dangers still lurked in the shadows. As night fell over the hospital, Penny made a decision. She had installed security cameras throughout their house, but had always felt it was unnecessary to put one in Blake's room, trusting Natalie completely. That trust had nearly cost them everything. She vowed never to be so naive again. Tucker settled into his temporary perch in Blake's hospital room, his presence bringing comfort to both the baby and his parents. The Parrot might have exposed one threat, but he sensed that their ordeal wasn't over. Somewhere out there, Natalie's associates were watching, waiting, planning their next move, and Tucker would be ready when they made it. The investigation was expanding, reaching into dark corners of the childcare industry that few had suspected existed. But for now, in the quiet hospital room, Tucker focused on what mattered most, keeping watch over the sleeping baby, whose life he had helped save, while remaining alert for any sign of the storms he knew were still to come. The hospital room had become a temporary fortress. Officers were still stationed outside, and only pre-approved medical staff could enter. Blake was recovering well, but Penny and Richard remained on high alert, scrutinizing every person who came near their son. Tucker maintained his vigilant watch from his new perch, installed especially in the hospital room. His presence had a calming effect on Blake, who would smile and reach for the Parrot whenever he was awake. The bond between them had grown stronger through their shared ordeal. Detective Reynolds, who had been assigned to lead the investigation, arrived with troubling news. "We've been digging into Natalie's background," he explained to Penny and Richard. "Everything about her, her credentials, her references, even her identity, it's all fabricated, but the forgeries are professional grade. This isn't the work of one person." Olivia, who had taken temporary leave from her job to support her sister, was helping piece together the evidence from Daisy's diary. "Look at this," she said, pointing to one of her daughter's entries. "Daisy wrote down something interesting Tucker said weeks ago about Natalie talking to someone about the next family and moving up the coast." The detective's expression darkened. "That matches our theory. We've uncovered similar cases up and down the coastline. Wealthy families, mysterious nanny figures, children getting sick, money disappearing. But every time someone got close to making a connection, evidence would vanish and witnesses would go silent." Tucker suddenly became agitated, hopping from foot to foot on his perch. "Phone in plant! Phone in plant!" he screeched, pointing his beak toward a decorative potted plant in the corner of the room. Detective Reynolds carefully approached the plant and, reaching deep into the soil, pulled out a small burner phone. It was still warm, recently used. She must have hidden it during one of her hospital visits, Richard realized, remembering how Natalie had brought fresh flowers every few days, always insisting on arranging them herself. The phone was quickly sealed in an evidence bag, but Tucker wasn't finished. "More phones! Home plant! Office plant!" The detective immediately dispatched officers to search all the planters in Penny and Richard's home and offices. Each one yielded another hidden phone or recording device. Natalie had been monitoring them far more extensively than anyone had realized. Meanwhile, in the hospital's computer lab, tech experts were working to recover data from the virus-infected systems. Despite Natalie's attempts to destroy everything, fragments of information remained. "It's a complete surveillance operation," the lead technician explained. "She wasn't just monitoring your activities. She was gathering information about your colleagues, your patients, your banking habits. Everything about your lives was being catalogued and analyzed." Penny felt a chill run down her spine. "But why? Why go to such lengths?" "Because you weren't the only targets," Detective Reynolds explained. "We've identified similar surveillance patterns at other hospitals up the coast. They're profiling medical professionals, doctors, surgeons, specialists, people with high incomes, demanding schedules, and young children." Richard's medical training kicked in as he processed this information. They're looking for specific vulnerabilities, families where both parents work long hours, where they'd need to rely heavily on childcare. "Exactly," the detective confirmed, "and they're patient. They spend months, sometimes years, gathering intelligence before making their move." Tucker, who had been listening intently, suddenly perked up. "Window! Look, window!" Everyone turned to the hospital room's window. In the building across the street, a figure quickly ducked out of sight. Detective Reynolds immediately radioed for officers to search the building, but Tucker's warning had come too late. By the time they reached the opposite building, they found only an abandoned camera setup and a half-drunk cup of coffee, still warm. They were being watched. The discovery prompted immediate action. The hospital room was moved to an interior location with no windows. Security was doubled, but the incident had shaken everyone's sense of safety. That evening, as Blake slept peacefully in his new room, Penny watched Tucker standing guard. The Parrot hadn't relaxed his vigilance for a moment, his head turning at every sound, his bright eyes scanning constantly for threats. "You've been protecting him all along, haven't you?" she whispered to Tucker, "even before we knew there was danger." Tucker bobbed his head once, then spoke with unexpected clarity. "Family protect family." The simple statement brought tears to Penny's eyes. She reached out and gently stroked Tucker's feathers. "Yes, yes we do. And your family too." Meanwhile, the investigation was expanding. Detective Reynolds had set up a command center in an unused hospital conference room. Maps covered the walls, showing locations of similar cases connected by red strings. Photos of suspected network members, most only partially glimpsed on security cameras, were grouped together, forming a shadowy organizational chart. But it was Daisy's diary that provided the most crucial breakthrough. Her childish entries, faithfully recording Tucker's warnings and her own observations, contained details that might otherwise have been missed. She had noted down snippets of phone conversations, descriptions of visitors, even small changes in Blake's behavior that adults had overlooked. "Look at this," Olivia said, pointing to one entry. Daisy wrote that 3 weeks ago Tucker became very upset when a delivery man came to the house. She thought it was strange because he usually likes visitors. The detective quickly cross-referenced the date. There was no scheduled delivery that day. None of your regular services reported being in your neighborhood. Richard frowned. Someone was scouting the house, probably documenting security measures, escape routes. The detective's voice trailed off as he noticed Tucker's increasing agitation. The Parrot was pacing on his perch, clearly distressed. "Coming soon. Coming soon," he warned. Before anyone could question what he meant, the hospital's lights flickered and went out. Emergency generators kicked in immediately, but in those few seconds of darkness, Tucker's warning took on a new urgency. They were about to discover that Natalie's network wasn't just watching, they were preparing to act. The question was, would Tucker's warnings be enough to protect Blake and his family from what was coming? The hospital's emergency generators cast an eerie glow through the corridors. In Blake's room, Tucker's agitation reached new heights. "They hear! They hear!" he screeched, his eyes fixed on the door. Detective Reynolds immediately radioed for backup, but the response was garbled. Someone was jamming their communications. In the confusion, a figure in hospital scrubs slipped into the room, moving with practiced efficiency. But Tucker was ready. The moment the intruder reached for Blake's crib, the parrot launched himself from his perch. Wings spread wide, creating enough of a distraction for Richard to tackle the would-be kidnapper. More officers rushed in, and the intruder was quickly subdued. When they removed the surgical mask, everyone gasped. The face belonged to one of Natalie's regular references, a woman who had vouched for her credentials. She was part of the network. "It's over," Detective Reynolds declared, securing the suspect. But Tucker remained agitated. More coming." He was right. The power outage had been a coordinated effort across the hospital. Security cameras caught glimpses of other figures in scrubs, all converging on their location. The network was making its move, determined to silence Natalie's victims before she could expose them. What they hadn't counted on was Daisy. The young girl who had been staying with her mother in a nearby room had continued her habit of taking notes. She had noticed and recorded suspicious activities throughout the hospital, staff members she didn't recognize, maintenance workers in areas they shouldn't be, unusual patterns in shift changes. Thanks to her observations, the police were able to quickly identify and apprehend the infiltrators one by one. The fake hospital staff were caught, each arrest revealing more about the network's operations. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. The USB drive that had initially seemed to destroy evidence had actually created a hidden backup, automatically uploading data to a secure server. The virus had been a smokescreen designed to make the network think their tracks were covered. Natalie, it turned out, had been playing both sides. While working for the criminal network, she had also been gathering evidence against them, building her own insurance policy. When cornered, she had activated the backup, ensuring that if she went down, she wouldn't go down alone. The final confrontation came as dawn broke over the hospital. The network's leadership, realizing their operation was compromised, made one last desperate attempt to contain the situation. But they had underestimated the power of a family united in protection of their youngest member. Tucker, ever vigilant, spotted the final intruder, the network's leader, attempting to access the hospital through a service entrance. His warning allowed the police to set up a perfect ambush, and the mastermind behind the operation was finally captured. In the aftermath, the full scope of the network's activities came to light. They had been operating for years, targeting wealthy families across the country. Natalie's detailed records, combined with Daisy's diary entries and Tucker's testimony, carefully translated and documented, provided enough evidence to dismantle the entire organization. Blake's examination revealed that, thanks to Tucker's early warnings, he had suffered no lasting effects from Natalie's treatments. The psychological trauma would take time to heal, but surrounded by love and support, his natural resilience began to shine through. Penny and Richard made significant changes to their lives. They adjusted their work schedules to spend more time at home, and when they did need childcare, they implemented rigorous verification processes. But more importantly, they learned to trust their instincts and to listen to those who showed genuine care for their family. Tucker was hailed as a hero. His story made headlines, highlighting the remarkable bond between animals and humans and the importance of paying attention to their warnings. But for Tucker, the greatest reward was simply being with his family, watching Blake grow stronger each day. Daisy's diary became a crucial piece of evidence in multiple cases, and her observant nature earned her special recognition from the police department. Her experience inspired her to start a peer support group for children to help them recognize and report suspicious behavior. Olivia and her family moved closer to Penny and Richard, strengthening their family bonds. The sisters realized that together they were stronger and better able to protect what mattered most. As for Natalie and her network, justice was served. The evidence was overwhelming, and the sentences were severe. The organization was dismantled, its members scattered or imprisoned. But perhaps more importantly, their exposure led to major reforms in childcare licensing and verification processes. One quiet evening, as the family gathered in their newly secured home, Tucker watched Blake playing safely on the floor. The baby looked up at his feathered protector and smiled, a pure, joyful expression that made all their trials worthwhile. "Family safe now," Tucker declared softly, settling onto his perch. Penny smiled, reaching out to stroke his feathers. "Yes, Tucker. Thanks to you, we're all safe now." Blake grew into a happy, healthy child with no memory of his early trauma. But the story of Tucker, the parrot who saved him, became a cherished family legend, passed down as a testament to the power of love, vigilance, and the unexpected heroes who sometimes enter our lives. The experience changed them all. They learned that real family isn't just about blood relations. It's about the bonds we forge through trust, protection, and unconditional love. And sometimes those bonds can come from the most unexpected sources, like a brave parrot who refused to stay silent in the face of danger. Tucker remained their faithful guardian, his watchful eyes never wavering in their protection of the family he loved. His warnings had not only saved Blake, but had exposed a darker side of the childcare industry, leading to changes that would protect countless other families in the future. And so their story became one of hope, proof that even in our darkest moments, heroes can emerge from unexpected places, and love can triumph over evil as long as we have the courage to listen and act when warnings come our way. Years later, Detective Reynolds would reflect on the case that had changed so many lives. He kept a special memento on his desk, a feather Tucker had shed during the final confrontation. It reminded him daily that sometimes the most important clues come from the most unexpected sources, and that vigilance, like love, knows no boundaries. The network that had once terrorized vulnerable families was now a distant memory, its dark influence erased by the light of truth Tucker had helped expose. In its place stood stronger protections, more vigilant communities, and families who had learned to listen more carefully, not just to words but to the warnings that come in many forms. As for the mysterious address Tucker had revealed during the investigation, the abandoned house where the network had hidden records of their past and future targets, it had been transformed into a sanctuary for rescued birds, a place where other feathered heroes could find safety and perhaps even help others as Tucker had done. Blake, now walking and talking, had developed a special bond with Tucker. The first full sentence he ever spoke was to the parrot, "Love you, Tucker." Those simple words, spoken with the pure innocence of childhood, were all the reward Tucker ever needed for his courage. And on quiet evenings, when the house was still, Tucker would sometimes whisper the names of places and people, addresses and details that had once been part of Natalie's network. He no longer needed to sound the alarm, but old habits die hard. He remained the guardian's voice, forever watchful, forever protective of the family that had become his own. In the end, it wasn't just a parrot who had saved a baby. It was a member of the family who had recognized a threat and refused to be silent. Tucker's story became more than just a tale of heroism. It became a reminder that family means protecting each other, no matter what form that family might take. And that, perhaps, was the greatest lesson of all. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the world of captivating stories. I trust you found today's narrative as engaging as I did. If you enjoyed this exploration into fascinating and compelling narratives, kindly indicate your appreciation by liking this video. Are you watching on mobile? Show your appreciation with a double tap for hype. For more captivating stories and journeys into the heart of compelling storytelling, please subscribe to the channel and activate notifications so you don't miss a single upload. Your thoughts and interpretations are most welcome. Please share your perspectives on today's story in the comments below. And if you believe others would find this content engaging, please consider sharing the video with your network. Until our next journey into the world of captivating tales, I bid you farewell.